Buffalo Bills team preview. Only person to talk to here, Jon Scott on Twitter at Jon Scott TV. He is the Buffalo Bills beat reporter for Spectrum News 1 in Buffalo. He has joined us before, gives us great insight. John, I'm going to kick it off right now. The big question that we're asking ourselves here at FTN is, how is this backfield going to take shape? Yes, James Cook, but is it Damien Harris? Latavius Murray is there. Of course, you have so many different moving parts. Nyheim Hines. Talk to us about who you think is going to be the lead back, who's going to get the goal line carries, third down carries. Sort it out for us here in the Buffalo backfield.
Yeah, I tend to think that James Cook is going to be the 1A in this group, with Damien Harris being the 1B. And you mentioned Latavius Murray. I don't even know if he's going to make the team. And I know that he's a name that is familiar with a lot of people, and he's even been productive in the limited amount of time that he's gotten in the past couple of years. But they also restructured Nyheim Hines. He also is their kick returner as well. So I tend to believe that it's going to be those three. It's going to be James Cook, Damien Harris, Nyheim Hines, with Latavius Murray, if they can sneak him on the practice squad, probably the fourth man waiting in the wings if they need some sort of a change of pace. I just don't anticipate them carrying four running backs on game day. So I would look for James Cook to kind of be the one who mainly digs into the load of carries that is now vacant because of Devin Singletary moving on to the Houston Texans. And then I think Harris will be kind of the change of pace, but in an opposite way that kind of Cook was to Devin Singletary, where maybe the power is going to come secondary with the receiving abilities of James Cook also being in the mix. And I think there are going to be times where you see two running backs on the field, whether that's James Cook and Nyheim Hines, more maybe a pass catching type of package, and then maybe even having Cook and Harris in the game at the same time to kind of keep defenses on their toes, whether or not they're going to run or they're going to pass.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue. It seems like the Bills, with their selection of Dalton Kincaid, going maybe two tight ends here. There was rumors of DeAndre Hopkins coming to Buffalo. Now, of course, the betting markets have him heavily going to Tennessee. Stephon Diggs, last time we talked, had taken stuff off of social media. So talk about how you think this offense will look this year. Will it change? Will we see two running backs, two tight ends more? Are they trying to transition here as they're one of the favorites here for the Super Bowl yet again?
I don't think philosophically they're going to be that different. Why would you take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands to hand it off to James Cook, Damien Harris, Nyheim Hines, Latavius Murray, or frankly, anyone there? I mean, their bread and butter is one of, if not the best quarterbacks in all of the game, and that is Josh Allen. So I don't particularly see the scale tipping too much more. It's like a 50-50 split. They're going to keep throwing the football and throw it a lot of times. It's all a matter of Stephon Diggs is going to be the absolute number one option. From there is the question, though. You mentioned Dalton Kincaid. They refer to him more as like a big slot receiver as opposed to thinking you're going to have him and Dawson Knox on the field lined on the line of scrimmage and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting. They also brought in Trent Sherfield. They brought in Deontay Hardy. Khalil Shakir is coming into his second season and showed moments. What type of step forward or more consistency do we see out of Gabe Davis? I think everyone beyond Stephon Diggs is kind of up for grabs. And at this point, I think that preseason and maybe September, early October is really what you need to focus in on, is to see kind of how the distribution goes, or maybe it's kind of a wild card and it's, all right, Stephon Diggs is going to get 8 to 10 targets each week, and then it may fluctuate who the second option truly is week in and week out.
Yeah, one of the players we love here at FTN is Khalil Shakir. I liked Isaiah McKenzie, but I felt he didn't quite pop as much last year as people thought he would. Is Shakir a guy that you think here as we head into the preseason? I'm curious, who are one or two players that we should look out for? We love team preseason, playing all the DFS, trying to figure out who those nuggets are, those players. Is Shakir one of those players? And if not, who are some other players that we should focus on in the preseason that maybe could make an impact later in the year for Buffalo?
Well, that's the interesting part. Who is in the slot? Again, Dalton Kincaid, immediately after being drafted, Brandon Beane, the general manager, referred to him and said, don't just look at him as a strictly tight end. Look at him almost as a bigger slot receiver. And he basically said, this is Cole Beasley, but a bigger body, a different maybe skill set, but he's a great route runner, can catch a lot of different passes, and he's their new option in terms of, filling the void of Beasley or what they're getting out of the slot. They also signed Trent Sherfield, who sees some action on the outside as well. Deontay Hardy is a guy they paid $7 million and who was pretty efficient in the 1 year a couple seasons ago that he kind of was really in the mix in New Orleans. And then you have Shakir. So I'm going to focus on the offense, those back end, like those last 3-4 options, and who truly is manning the slot the most. And so that's early in the season where I would focus, because I truly do think it's going to be Stephon Diggs without question number one. I do think Gabe Davis is the unquestioned number two. It's where the rest of those targets go amongst that group of 3-4 guys that I think is really going to be interesting to monitor.
Last question, John. Great stuff as always. Then we'll get you out of here. Of course, we're going to talk about the schedule. You have Ken Dorsey, offensive coordinator, but looks like Sean McDermott going to be heavily involved, even more so than normal, on the defensive side of the ball. This schedule, in my opinion, sets up to a fast start. You have the Jets, you have Vegas, Washington, Miami, Jacksonville, and the Giants. But after that, the back end is very challenging. At Philadelphia, their bye week in week 13, at Kansas City, Dallas, at the Chargers, New England, and Miami. I would think getting off to a hot start here is something that the Bills are really focusing on, and talk about the coaching changes here with McDermott taking more of a role with the defenses. Are there going to be some changes, you think, as they try to get off to that good start and really put themselves in a prime position to host those playoff games and get to the Super Bowl?
On the defensive side of the ball, whether it is coaches who have been on his staff currently and also previously when he was actually a defensive coordinator, whether it be in Philadelphia or Carolina, or Ron Rivera has been asked about it at the Combine. Whenever someone is asked, how would you describe Sean McDermott as a defensive play caller? Aggressive is the word that is often used. And that's not something I would say would be a good description of what the Bills defense has been under Leslie Frazier since 2017. They've been a top 5 defense, a very good defense, but they've been a very sort of vanilla defense. They didn't blitz a whole lot. They make sure they keep everything in front of them so they don't get beat deep often, but often, maybe it's, rallying to the tackle, kind of bleeding them dry and then holding them in the red zone. That's kind of has been their MO here. Let's see if Sean McDermott dials it up a little more. Let's see if he maybe switches more so out of the zone coverage that they play in the back end and goes man-to-man a little bit more, which again could lead to some big plays, especially against some of those big-time offenses that you mentioned in the back end. So that's where we have to kind of wait and see, and you won't see it in the preseason. They're not going to divulge what kind of defensive game plan they're going to do. Those first, 4 or 5 games that you mentioned, I think are going to be critical, and they're also critical because the Jets, so much is talked about them because they get Aaron Rodgers. You don't want to come out the gate, you're 0-1 and you lose to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and then 4 weeks later you play the Miami Dolphins and potentially start 0-2 in what's going to be a tight division. And that's kind of discounting New England, which you never know what they're going to be with Bill Belichick. And offensively, there's a lot of pressure on Ken Dorsey because even though statistically they kind of look the same as they did under Brian Daboll, the eye test told you otherwise. It just was a grind the back end of the season, which is a miraculous statement considering they were averaging 30 points a game and 400 plus yards of offense. Let's see if they reincorporate different personnel packages like we discussed. Dalton Kincaid on the field more, multiple 2 running back sets. Let's see how that happens. Let's see if they do more pre-step motion. Let's see if they pick up the pace a little bit, just more variety, and see if Ken Dorsey in his second year ever as an offensive play caller can maybe make it easier than the numbers suggested a year ago.
Big season coming up for the Bills, folks, and no one else I go to than Jon Scott on Twitter at Jon Scott TV, Spectrum News 1 in Buffalo. John, thanks for a few minutes here. We'll check in with you again as we get closer to the season, but we're close. We're 56 days away from that September 7th game, so certainly big aspirations in Buffalo and a lot of talent here, so I'm sure it'll be an exciting year for you.